this royal couple, and I mean that. They are among the royal couples in journalism. And to be more precise, they were among the royal couples of blacks in journalism. I'm talking about Felecia and Angelo Henderson. As a couple, and certainly individually, Felecia and Angelo dedicated their lives to the craft of journalism and the inclusion of people of color and women at all levels of the industry. My initial interaction with Felecia and Angelo was probably in the late 80s, early 90s. We weren't friends yet, but we're like many in NABJ who attended national conventions around the country. We hung out. You knew who they were. He at the time had stints at the St. Petersburg Times and the Courier-Journal and the Detroit News here. She at the time had been at the Cincinnati Post and her hometown newspaper, the Courier-Journal. You see where that's going, right? By the mid-90s, I'd come to know them both, and we shared mutual friends, and I see them at the conventions in NABJ. By 1999, when I moved to Detroit, we became friends. Also by that time, the work of Angelo and Felecia in journalism and in community was cemented in the firmament of journalism. Both are known for helping others. If you were Angelo's friend, he was there for you. If you were a student, he'd stop what he's doing and help you out, give you advice, write a letter, curse you out. That didn't just apply to students though, so if you weren't doing right. Angelo was gregarious and never hesitated to offer his opinion on any subject of your life. In the fall of '99, after I'd been in Detroit for about 3 months, I spent a week touring the city with other journalists new to Detroit. It was part of that program sponsored by Wayne State, and you spend a week visiting communities, activism, and those kinds of things. It was about 40, so on 50 maybe on a coach bus, crisscrossing the city. One day, Angelo yells from the back of the bus, "Vincent, why haven't you joined the NABJ chapter yet? What's up with that?" I, from the front of the bus, meekly replied, "Well, I just got to stop. Man, it's September. You've been here since July." I've been a member ever since. Also that week, though, as we toured the city, we took the opportunity to see some sights. As we drove past Mumford High School, the tour guide at the time was a then Detroit columnist who was giving us the tour of that side of town, and he lamented how the community around Mumford had changed. Well, Angelo from the back of the bus, well, I can't tell you what he said. I can't tell you what he said, but the point was made. That was Angelo. And of course, earlier in that year, '99, he had won the Pulitzer Prize while he was at the Wall Street Journal. And he was the first black to win that prize at the Wall Street Journal, and that remains so today. Now, if you're Felicia's friend, or Flea as some call her, now everybody knows that, right? You know she's not only gorgeous, with that smile that lights up a room, like right now, but she's that consoling counselor that will listen to your job and personal struggles, the stern friend and mentor that'll shake you out of the doldrums with compassion. She rarely says no to helping anybody, colleagues, friends, mentees. And while she may not always verbalize what's on her mind, watch her face.
Oh, geez, you told her.
Her face will generally express her thoughts. She's working on controlling that. Here's an example. In November, this past November, when we at the Detroit News, who were eligible for the buyouts, were given those offers, I strolled on down to her office just to chit-chat and talk about things. And I said to her, you know, got the offer, she got the offer. I don't think I'm going to take it. She just looked at me, didn't say a word. Yeah, you know, I'm not ready to stop working, and I don't know why I take it. You know. Then I looked up, and there was that smile. And that look on the face that didn't say anything, but I knew, okay, maybe I should think about this a little harder. And I did, and I took it, and as did she. It's those kinds of qualities with Felecia that you rarely see in people. Sometimes she doesn't have to say a word. Through their years in Detroit, each has made a mark in journalism and the community, from Angelo's advocacy as host of Your Voice on WCHB, his ministry as a preacher, and the founder of the anti-crime group Detroit 300. Felecia continues to be active in the profession and the community affairs. She's the immediate past president of Chapter-NABJ, serves as the honorary co-chair for Angels for Life for the Gift of Life Motel Walk. She's a member of Leadership Detroit, and last year she received her master's degree of organization development, right, from Bowling Green State University. Earlier this month, she was awarded a Distinguished Alumni Award from her alma mater, Murray State University. She's also part of an effort to establish the Angelo Henderson Endowed Scholarship and Lecture Series at his alma mater, the University of Kentucky, where he was inducted into the Alumni Hall of Fame there about a year ago. And, oh, did I mention that she's a Delta too? Did I mention that? She's a Delta. As you know, we lost Angelo in February 2014. But his spirit thrives now through all the young journalists he mentored, the people he counseled as a friend and preacher, and the lasting work of Detroit 300's efforts as anti-crime in the neighborhoods. Most important, though, I think, his spirit thrives in his son, Grant, who's here tonight, who has established a clothing line, Greatness the One, a business intended to encourage young people to become entrepreneurs and give back to their communities. So with that, I'd like for us to stand and acknowledge Felecia and Vincent. Felecia takes the away to the stage.
It started with my senior editor weekend rotations, where I'd have to call him on Saturday and Sunday mornings to see how the landscape was going, any breaking news. And then he mentioned that I was past president of NABJ. How this got started, when I got elevated to president, I needed a vice president to replace me. And I said, come on, Vince, we can do this. He's like, no. I'm like, yeah, you can do this. So then in December of 2016, I was halfway through my graduate program, and I said, I can't continue doing this. I've got to focus on my master's. So Vince, I'm going to step down. And he was like, are you serious? Because now that means I'm going to be president. I said, yeah, you can do this, you can do this. And he did a great job. He and Vicki Thomas, they planned the National NABJ convention that was in Detroit last year. So well, I have to say, the other thing I forgot, these days I'm also calling him not only my tag team partner, but my buyout brother. When Kelly Root called me with the news that Angelo and I would be receiving this award, I was like, what? Are you serious? I mean, I was completely blown away. But I'm just so appreciative of the award. And there's a scripture that I thought was perfect for tonight. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Angelo used to have this saying that journalism will drive you straight to Jesus. And as it turned out, after a 20-year career, he went straight to Hope United Methodist Church, where he became an assistant pastor. But, I have to thank the Lord first and foremost, because without him, I don't know if I could have sustained a near 35-year career in journalism, and I certainly wouldn't be standing here tonight to accept this award for Angelo and myself. Secondly, I want to thank the SPJ Detroit Board of Directors for this amazing award, to be honored by my peers, my mentor, Walter Middlebrook, the coolest boss and friend, Marty Fishoff, as we mentioned, my Delta Sigma Theta sorority sister, Chastity Pratt Dawsey, my colleague and friend, Kelly Root, my former colleagues, Mike Whalen and Marsha Hart, and my NABJ sister, Kat Stafford. This is just amazing. I also want to thank my support system who's here tonight. We mentioned our son, Angelo Grant. He graduated this time last year with a BA in economics from the University of Michigan Dearborn. He's headed off to LA in the summer to do his thing in brand marketing, so that's going to be exciting. I want to acknowledge my cousin, my sister, Paula Bridges. Some of you may know her from her days as the spokesperson for Wayne County Sheriff, and before that, DPD. Our brother Aaron Smith, of course, my buyout brother Vince, my dear friend Orlando Brand Williams, and very rarely do you get to call your reporters your friend, but Susan Whitehall. And I want to acknowledge the staff of the Detroit News. I tell you, the last 5 years would have been so difficult without the support that they gave me. So I want to say thank you. And I'll come back to that later. The timing for this award is very unique. Clearly it's the universe at play, because last month, or back in March, Marty asked me, how long have you been in the business? And I was like, okay, almost 30 years. And I realized 35 years in March of '84. So that's where the News Girl '84 comes from, because that's when I started at the Courier-Journal. And then I realized after Kelly called me that it was 30 years ago this month that Angelo started at the Detroit News. So I was like, the universe, right? And it started for Angelo. He knew he wanted to be a journalist. He called his dad the first journalist, because whenever there was news, he had one of those CB radios. And so whenever there was news, he said, come on, let's get in the car. And they would chase fire trucks. I mean, when he was 70-something, we went home, and he was down there with the Metropolitan Sewer District, trying to figure out what was going on with the sewers. And it was like, okay. So he was the first reporter. He'd make him watch the nightly news. He absolutely hated it. But by the time he got in high school, he knew he wanted to be a journalist. He was on the Male High School yearbook staff. He went on to Northwestern's National High School Institute program, the chair program, and spent 2 weeks at the Urban Journalism Workshop at the University of Kentucky. I too worked on my yearbook staff at Iroquois High and wanted to be a TV producer. I wanted to be behind the scenes, running things, not the talent. So as a freshman at UK, Angelo was a reporter at the Kentucky Colonel. Then he and E.J. Mitchell, some of you all know him, they started The Communicator, a black student publication on campus. He had summer internship at the CBS affiliate in Louisville and convinced the editors at the Herald Leader in Lexington to hire him as a year-long intern, a business intern at the newspaper his senior year in college. Meanwhile, at Murray State, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I had so many choices. You know, I wanted to be this behind-the-scenes TV producer, but they said, no, you need to be in front of the camera. And I tried this stint as a weather person and it was horrible because I couldn't get any of those states on the map. I was like, no, I don't want to do this. I learned radio broadcasting there, the art of news writing, transitions, cut-ins, as well as the broadcast lingo for WKMS, the public radio station, where I fell in love with the art of headline writing, you know, the challenge. How do you summarize a story in 5 words? And I eventually became the production chief for the Murray State News, but I quit. I loved the job, but I quit because after 1 semester, because I was like, it's cutting into my social life. But somehow I didn't remember that when I decided the career path that I chose, because I've worked every shift except 3 a.m. to 11 a.m. So by that time, Angelo graduated from UK with 2 offers, the Chicago Tribune and the St. Pete Times, and he chose the latter. I, on the other hand, didn't know what I was going to do. And I started out as a secretary. My mother taught business, typing, and shorthand. She said, you need those skills because you can always fall back as a secretary. So that's what I did for the first couple months, but the Courier-Journal was 2 blocks down, and I called the job hotline every week. And eventually, the HR director called and said, why in the world are you applying for every job? So she said, let me see what your interests are. Shortly, fast forward, I became a clerk reporter. And so what sealed my fate was about a year after I started, and the TV writer for the Louisville Times, that was the evening newspaper, had written this review of this new TV show, and it was very similar to The Cosby Show. It starred Flip Wilson, Gladys Knight. They had the same number of kids and everything. He said the show was so similar that even the actresses looked alike. So like Felicia Rashad and Gladys Knight looked alike. Oh, man. So I went to the managing editor and I said, you know, I'm sorry, but this reads like all black people look alike. And he was so embarrassed. But that actually sealed my fate because I knew then I wanted to be a copy editor that mattered. I wanted to be that person that was working the last line of defense before stories were published. I wanted accuracy, I wanted fairness, I wanted diversity, and I wanted inclusion. So after 18 months of covering the tourism beat and the seedier side of life in St. Pete, Angelo was covering the crack cocaine epidemic and how it was impacting the residents there, African-American residents, and that kind of got his start with crime reporting. He had 2 offers, one to go to the Philly Inquirer to be a GA bureau reporter, or to come to the Courier-Journal to cover small minority business. So that's how he ended up at the CJ. We're working together and we're dating. And here's the interesting thing. We grew up in the same city, had the same circle of friends, lived less than 5 miles from each other, and never knew each other until E.J. Mitchell introduced us. So at that point, I was ready to do copy editing, couldn't do that there, so I went to the editing program for minority journalists at the University of Arizona. And it was a program founded by the Institute for Journalism Education, which was created by the country's first black editor, publisher, and owner of the Oakland Tribune, Robert C. Maynard. I spent 8 weeks of intensive training to become a copy editor by leading editors from the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Detroit Free Press, and representing the Detroit News, Walter Middlebrook. Yes, that's where, I learned a lot from him, and he became one of my first editors. So after graduating from that program, that's how I got to Cincinnati. And right after that, Angelo and I got engaged, and he calls me and said, we got this offer to come to Detroit. And I'm like, Detroit, for real? No, I don't want to go to Detroit. Detroit's cool, I got family here, but I don't want to go to Detroit. Aren't there some other choices? But long story short, We came up here in August, and we were hired in April of '89. He came in May. I followed in November, 2 weeks after we got married and 2 weeks before the start of the JOA. And as much as I questioned moving here, and Angelo said we were leaving after the first winter, we fell in love with Detroit. You know, it's just something about Detroit, and it was the best move ever. So it was here that we had a series of career and personal highs and lows. And in that highs column was Angelo being able to cover small and minority business on a much bigger scale here in Detroit. And I got to have my dream job. Everybody believed in us. Frank Levinsky, who hired me, Sue Brzezinski, Luther Keith, who gave me my first shot at managing a department with On Detroit, Mark Hass, Bob Giles, Marty Fishoff was my editor when I came back. That's another story. I was at the news, the Free Press, and then came back to the news. And I worked for Marty in features, E.J. Mitchell, Gary Miles, and John Woolman. Over at the Free Press, I worked in features as an assistant features editor. Dale Perry, Sharon Wilmore, Tina Crowley, Carol Lee Hutton, and the late great Bob Magruder. And at the Wall Street Journal, Angelo had great editors than Bob Simonson, Ken Wells, and John Bretcher. You know, one of the other highlights again was the birth of Grant, our newsroom baby, and NABJ baby. As Vincent mentioned, Angelo winning the Pulitzer in '99. Then 19 years later, I became a Pulitzer jury, and this year I was chair of the features writing jury. And then, you know, Angelo and I made history, not trying to, but we were the first couple to be presidents of the Detroit chapter of NABJ. He led it from '92 to '94, and me from 2015 to 2017. And Angelo was named one of the country's foremost experts on race. And celebrated his 15th anniversary with Radio 1 in Detroit in January of 2014, hosting his show. And, you know, the last success that I had was a tremendous one, being tapped by John Woolman just a few months after his arrival to be an assistant managing editor, becoming one of the few senior editors as a black female in the country, and managing an amazing staff of reporters and copy editors and page designers. I mean, it was really a dream job, and I was blessed to have it. In the lows column, and there's only two, which is a blessing, unsupported editors. Did I say Linda Raymond and Susan Taylor Martin? No, I didn't say that. You know, being told that I was aiming too high to work for a major newspaper, and Angelo being told he was the worst writer in the department. You know, a takeaway for you to remember, we know as journalists words matter, what we write, what we say on the air, but words matter when you communicate with people. And those harsh words spoken by those two editors didn't get the best of us. Actually, what they did was motivate us. So in the time since Angelo passed in 2014, I have, thank God, on so many occasions for the support system I had at the Detroit News. Gary and John gave me the space that I needed, were always there encouraging, and just, you know, they trusted me and believed in my leadership. And I also got that same support from many of you in the room. Susan Tompor at the Free Press, Rochelle Riley. Rochelle was one of 5 journalists who helped establish the scholarship in Angelo's name in the UK. So, you know, to wrap this up, a few years ago, I introduced Walter to Judge Damon Keith. And Judge Keith asked why he had never met him. And Walter said, I like to, you know, I prefer to stay in the background to make things happen. And I realized, I understood that because I too like to do that as well, make things happen and support my reporters. So when I think about the reason that I knew copy editing was my destiny, accuracy, fairness, diversity, inclusion, it leads me to think about what's happening today in our industry. With so much talk of diminishing diversity in our newsroom and coverage, diversity and inclusion must be intentional. 20 years ago, signs were placed all over our newsroom about ensuring diverse voices were included in stories. Now, I'm not advocating for signage, but do it if you need to. What I'm saying is, have those conversations with your editors, have those conversations with your reporters about including voices in your stories and inclusion of staffers of color in the news process. You have people of color on staff. Learn to trust their viewpoint, don't doubt it. On Vincent's last day at the news, he shared a quote from Bob Maynard, founder of the Robert C. Maynard Institute for Journalism Education. This country cannot be the country we want it to be if its story is told by only one group of citizens. Our goal is to give all Americans front door access to the truth. Thank you very much.